But first, we take a look at the International Court of Justice. This week, the ICJ is set to hear a South African application under the Genocide Convention accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. Should the application be accepted, the ICJ could issue a temporary injunction on Israel to immediately stop bombing Gaza. In the 84-page application, South Africa claims that, quote, acts and omissions by Israel are genocidal in character as they are committed with the requisite specific intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza as part of the broader Palestinian national, racial, and ethnical group, analyzes Marjorie Cohn in Truth Out this week. The application adds that, quote, the conduct of Israel through its state organs, state agents, and other persons and entities acting on its instructions or under its direction, control, or influence in relation to Palestinians in Gaza is in violation of its obligations under the Genocide Convention. Cohen adds that, quote, Israel is mounting a full court press to prevent an ICJ finding that it's committing genocide in Gaza. On January 4th, the Israeli Foreign Ministry instructed its embassies to pressure politicians and diplomats in their host countries to make statements opposing South Africa's case at the ICJ. We're honored to be joined now by Michael Lynk. Michael served as the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the Occupied Palestinian Territory from 2016 to 2022. Michael is a professor of law at Western University in London, Ontario, and a non-resident fellow at the think tank Dawn, Democracy for the Arab World Now. He joins us to talk about the significance of Israel's genocide at the International Court of Justice. Michael, thank you so much for being with us on the Electronic Intifada's live stream.
A great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start by having you give us a basic outline of what the ICJ is, how it works, and what are the provisional measures that we're hearing about.
Sure. The International Court of Justice is a 15-judge court based in The Hague. It is the highest court in the United Nations system. These judges are elected for 9-year terms. And they come from different parts of the world. There's a geographic representation on the court. The court is sometimes confused with the International Criminal Court, which is also in The Hague. The International Criminal Court has jurisdiction under the Rome Statute of 1998 to look into war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And that's where the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court is anchored. This is the International Court of Justice, and it has several functions. One of them is to determine and adjudicate disputes between member states of the United Nations, and as such, under its charter, it can settle or adjudicate disputes involving the Genocide Convention of 1948. And both Israel and South Africa are members of the Genocide Convention. And what South Africa has done in filing its application with the International Court of Justice at the very end of December is saying that we, South Africa, have a responsibility, a universal responsibility, to try to prevent genocide wherever and whenever it is occurring. And we think it's occurring now in Israel's operations and military operations in Gaza over the last 3 months. Therefore, we're coming to you, International Court of Justice, with an application for provisional measures to try to bring this genocide to a halt immediately, with the prospect of a trial coming several years down the road.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of South Africa bringing this case and the complaint being rooted in apartheid analysis?
Sure. Let's keep in mind that genocide is deemed to be the crime of crimes. There's a hierarchy of crimes at the international level. Genocide is right at the very top of that. And we've seen that obviously through our discussions through the 20th century of a range of atrocities that have been accepted as genocide by the international community. And presently, we have another case in front of the International Court of Justice where the Gambia just like South Africa, the Gambia brought a case against Myanmar alleging genocide and saying we have a responsibility to bring this to an end. And the court in that case in 2020 issued provisional measures, which are the equivalent of injunctions at the American or Canadian court level, asking for this to be frozen, for the acts of genocide to be, or alleged genocide to be brought to an end while the court prepares for a full trial. A full trial will occur with respect to Myanmar around 2025. If this goes ahead with respect to South Africa's application against Israel, I suspect it would be another 3 or 4 years before the full trial would wind up occurring in front of the International Court of Justice. But what South Africa is arguing is that, yes, we're focused on what's going on for the last 3 months, but also, just like Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, said, the events here didn't happen in a vacuum. There is a long history before October 7th, and South Africa is raising the issue that we have to understand this in the context of 1947 to 1949. 1967, when the Israeli blockade was brought into Gaza in 2007. All of this has to be contextual background, including the issue of apartheid. When we consider what Israel is doing now, we have to have a wide aperture in understanding Israel's actions, in particular that Israel is a serial defier of international law. There have been numerous resolutions coming from the UN Security Council, for example, with respect to the illegality of Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem, the illegality of the settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, the many comments with respect to Israel's human rights violations. So all of this, South Africa is rightly saying, has to be in the mix, has to be in the context. And I'm sure this will be argued by the lawyers for South Africa when the hearings begin tomorrow, Thursday, in The Hague.
Mm-hmm.
And those hearings will be broadcast live, and I'll definitely be watching them. And I know people all over the world will. I have 2 questions for you, Michael. One is, can we expect the court to take an impartial decision based on the merits of the case, and every serious, impartial person who's looked at the case says it's very strong? I'd like to hear if you agree with that. The second thing is, are these provisional measures enforceable? If the court says at the end of this hearing, or however long it takes, this military action, whether it's genocide or not, must stop pending the court's decision, can they enforce that? What happened in the case of Myanmar? Did the court's ruling provisional measures make any difference?
Thank you. Those are both great questions, Ali. The first question is you asked goes to, is this an impartial court? And the answer, yes. This is an impartial court, and it has delivered important rulings on the side of an expansive liberal view of human rights and international law in the recent past. Consider 2004, 20 years ago, there was an advisory opinion that Palestine urged the General Assembly to ask of the International Court of Justice on the legality of the wall that Israel was and is still constructing through the occupied West Bank. And the court issued a very strong ruling in that case that the location of the wall was illegal. It also said that the settlements are illegal, and it also made comments with respect to the illegal annexation of East Jerusalem. And more recently, the court issued an important decision with respect to the Chagos Islands, those small string of islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean that the United Kingdom separated from Mauritius at the time of Mauritius's independence 60 years ago. And the International Court of Justice, in its ruling several years ago, said that was wrong. That was a violation of international law, and it's forced the United Kingdom to negotiate with Mauritius over the return of the islands to Mauritian sovereignty. So I think we all should be hopeful and expect that the court will rule as judges will, in an impartial fashion, based on the law and the facts in front of it. The second question, Ali, that you've mentioned, is if the court does wind up issuing provisional measures with respect to what South Africa is asking, are these enforceable? The answer is no in the court of law, Yes, hopefully in the court of public opinion. There is no, in international law, there is no separate army or police to enforce these orders. And we know that from a long history with respect to Israel's non-compliance with hundreds of UN resolutions, and indeed with the order that the court issued 20 years ago on the legality or the illegality of the wall. But let's keep in mind this. International law will not liberate Palestine in the end. That's going to have to be a political task between the international civil society pushing the international community to work with Palestinians fighting against the occupation and against the denial of their rights. But international law combined with international resolve can be a very important tool. And for a country to have an allegation of genocide, even provisionally accepted by an important court like the ICJ, would do great political damage to it. So I guess we have to see this as you would want to see this in the realm of politics, in the realm of activism and civil society, as to what the court may wind up delivering. But I want to add just one other thing very quickly. No good lawyer would ever want to say any case which is being contested is a slam dunk. Israel will have all of Friday to make arguments, and I suspect the arguments they will make will be twofold. One, they'll argue that October 7th was a human rights catastrophe, that it was an atrocity, and I'm sure they'll be showing slides or videos to the court with respect to what they said happened on October 7th. And therefore, flowing from that, Israel will be arguing self-defense. They'll say that everything they've done is in self-defense after what arose on October 7th, and everything they've done since has been within the strict bounds of international law. Now, I'm curious to see what kind of facts they're going to marshal with respect to self-defense, with regards to how they've conducted the war, in claiming that it's not genocidal and it's not even war crimes or crimes against humanity. That's a pretty tall order for Israel to want to make. But we have to keep in mind that there's going to be two arguments, two diametrically opposed arguments made to the court, and this may influence what the court winds up doing. The court could do three things. It could do nothing, which with respect to the request for provisional measures, I highly doubt that's what they will do. It could make a provisional measures order tailored to exactly what South Africa is asking for, an end to the conflict, immediate end, and a ceasefire, and to withdraw all of its troops from that, and to allow humanitarian aid to enter in full into the Gaza Strip. The third option is that they could issue a both-sidisms provisional measure. One, accepting some or all of what South Africa has said, but also directing an order against Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups in Gaza, telling them that they should not be committing genocide as well. So it's up in the air as to what the court will wind up doing. It'll either be number 2 or number 3, I suspect. And I'm saying that as a lawyer that tries to read and understand how this court winds up thinking.
Michael, go ahead, Nora.
Oh, I was just going to ask about the implications for the U.S. In all of this too. Does this ruling or provisional measures or an injunction have any impact on the Biden administration?
Sure. Again, let's think of it as two things, and one in terms of law and one in terms of politics. In terms of law, if the court issued a strong provisional measures with respect to there's a prima facie case or a plausible case of genocide that's ongoing that South Africa has made out, then that puts the United States in what I think is a good, difficult position, given its high degree of support for Israel's atrocities in Gaza. It will also strengthen the case that has now been filed by the Center for Constitutional Rights in the American courts with respect to trying to end American complicity with regards to this. Politically, this may be, that kind of nudge that the United States needs to finally say to Israel, stop, enough is enough. I mean, here we have Anthony Blinken saying, on the one hand, there's far too many civilians have been killed, as he said yesterday in Tel Aviv, by also saying that he thought the South African application was meritless. Anybody who said it's meritless has not read the 84 pages. If I can just say one quick thing, this is an extraordinary piece of legal advocacy that the lawyers acting for South Africa put together. I was worried when I heard this was coming. This was going to be a 15-page slapped together application over the Christmas holidays. This is the best single document available about what Israel has been doing over the last 3 months, and it's accessible to non-lawyers. It is an extraordinary document, and the court has to take this seriously.
That's hopefully very encouraging. We'll definitely be watching closely. I have two questions. One is from a viewer who wants to know how the judges are selected. I think that reflects a lot of concern, given, I suppose, and I'd love for you to comment on this, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which is a separate institution, that's not what we're talking about today, that's a court which brings individual prosecutions against people. For example, it could bring a prosecution against Benjamin Netanyahu or Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. The International Court of Justice is not a court that brings cases against individuals. It's a court where states bring cases against other states, if I have that correctly.
Yeah.
But given the fact that the International Criminal Court, and tell me if you agree with this, has been so transparently biased in its dealings with the situation in Palestine, there is a lot of suspicion and concern about whether Palestinians can get anywhere at the ICJ. So I think that may be what's behind the question of how are the judges selected. The other question I have is, can the court, in its provisional measures, say Israel must stop, Hamas must stop, or whatever it might say there, but can it also say to third countries, we also order that third countries cease and desist from aiding and abetting what may or may not be genocide? We haven't decided on that yet, and therefore no arms deliveries and so on. Is that within the court's power? Is it within the realm of possibility?
Okay, thanks. Again, great questions. And these will have to be, unfortunately, the last questions that I'm able to answer. First, you've asked generally, how are the judges selected at the ICJ? And you're asking that in the context of, will this get a fair shake? And what does that mean in contrast to what's going on at the ICC? The judges are elected by the General Assembly, and keep in mind actually that it's a 15 judge court, and they're in rotation of that every 3 years 5 judges end their term and wind up leaving. In fact, 5 of the judges, including the president of the court, an American, Joan Donoghue, are leaving the court at the very beginning of February. So that's why I suspect that this current court will want to have the provisional measures issued by the end of January or the very beginning of February, while the present composition of the court is there. You're right, Ali. I guess the job description of the International Court of Justice is to decide and adjudicate disputes between countries, as well as decide issues involving advisory opinions being asked by the General Assembly to the court. And keep in mind, there is an advisory opinion that's been put to the court that'll be heard the middle of next month in February, with respect to whether or not the occupation is illegal. And one of the arguments being the question of apartheid. Does that make what Israel has been doing over the last while illegal? So I don't want to lose focus of that hearing either. What impact might this have with respect to the ICC? I share the concerns behind your question, Ali, with respect to how glacial the ICC's prosecutor's office has been moving over the last 9 years since the first application was put to it in January of 2015 on the question of the situation in Palestine. I would hope that the that the 84-page application by South Africa is now in front of on the desk of the prosecutor of the ICC, because genocide obviously is one of the issues that the ICC has jurisdiction over. And I can only imagine that this will be pushed by civil society and by other countries, including South Africa, at the ICC with respect to this. The pressure, I'm sure, is getting close to being unbearable on the present prosecutor in terms of showing much more dynamism and much more neutrality on this issue than he and his predecessors have shown to date. You've also asked me with respect to provisional measures and whether or not that would include an order to other countries. I'm not aware, because I haven't thought of it, whether or not the provisional measures asked by South Africa include a demand with respect to other countries. But if there is a plausible case of genocide that's reflected in the provisional measures order by South Africa, that would put increasing pressure on those countries that are supporting Israel, either diplomatically or, more importantly, militarily, to be able to review and rethink with respect to this. So let's hope that what we wind up getting is a dynamic provisional measures order that puts pressure on these countries with respect to the support they've been giving Israel, and gives an additional tool to civil society to press, for an end to arms sales to Israel, and an end, obviously, to, as soon as possible, to the occupation and to the denial of human rights.
Michael Lynk, we appreciate you so much for coming on the live stream. We'd love to have you back on, perhaps after the ICJ hearings. And we look forward to reading your analysis, which I know you'll be writing after this as well. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you very much for asking me, and thank you very much for the indispensable work that the Electronic Intifada winds up doing.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment. These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.